Hello, friends, and thank you for joining me on this Sabbath broadcast. I appreciate you taking the time to spend some fellowship with us as we celebrate the oncoming spring and preparations for what will be the advent of Passover, which is tonight. And Jazz says that the new moon was spotted on the 31st, and that we know that there are many signs within the heavens, in the sun and the moon, especially with the four tetrad blood red moons being linked to certain Hebraic and Jewish festivals and feast days, and that these are significant in that the two times that this occurred prior, which it does not happen very often at all, and yet three times in this century these particular signs did take place. Once in 1948, when what I consider to be the blooming of the fig tree took place, and Israel was regathered as a nation and given their same capital, or at least half of it. And also during, I believe it was 1967 and the Six-Day War, when the rest of Jerusalem was captured and was seeded into what was the the fullness of the land at that time, and that many of you know where I am as far as the United Nations having pushed for what we consider to be the blooming of the fig tree, but that, in my opinion, it is all prophetic, and that everything, even if it's done by the New World Order, is not allowed unless it is the will of the Most High, and that other aspects of prophecy were also fulfilled, in that during that particular, when Israel came to be a nation again, immediately following, there have been wars and ongoing divisions between the Palestinians that were in the land and the Jewish people that were brought over to seize the land, and all of the other Muslim nations that are there surrounding. In Zechariah chapter 12, it says the Most High said that he would make Jerusalem a cup of trembling amongst the nations, and that this certainly has been a thorn for a lot of peoples worldwide, in that they attribute what occurred then to being the reason for just cause for jihad and never-ending wars, and that these kind of things were also established and prepared for by the New World Order elites, especially if you read and study the work of Albert Pike, which was a 33rd degree Freemason. He was a Grandmaster, head of the Scottish Rite. He was also a general for the Confederate side during the Civil War, and he's also the one that funded and brought together and established the Ku Klux Klan in the South, and that he, together with, in dialogue with Giuseppe Mazzini, who was the head of the mafia in Italy, and one of the ones that organized and brought that aspect of secret societies and the strong arm of the global elite together, that they have been preparing for and attempting to bring together world government, and that they had three phases which have turned out to be quite prophetic, three phases to their agenda and to their plan to bring this particular system of governments upon the world, in that all the peoples of the world could be oppressed through this particular system, and that they spoke about bringing on and propagating three global wars. One, World War One, World War Two, when World War One established and brought forth the League of Nations, which, even though it failed, it instituted and brought and assimilated the peoples of the world to the idea of an organization which would represent all the nations of the world, and that through this particular organization, the affairs of humanity could be doled out and tried, and that there could be, that it would represent a system of justice, which idealistically sounds really cool, and like it might be something that would actually work if it weren't for a sinister agenda, and that the organization had its founding and its bearing completely twisted and directed by forces of evil, and that the seed of Cain has absolutely utilized the United Nations and the League of Nations for its own purposes, and that it has nothing to do with looking after the common good of the world and of all the nations of the world. That its main goal is to be the force and to be the organizing structure which would allow the elites, the globalists, the transnationalists, to elect those that are given the divine right of kings, the forces behind the protocols of the learned elders of Lucifer, that these individuals are the ones that have been attempting and fomenting the United Nations and the League of Nations since even before its inception and its acceptance by the world. And that if you look into the history and to some of the darker aspects and chapters of the United Nations, you'll find that it's had Nazis, high-level Nazis, as its, as the chairman or the head of the United Nations, and that the different standing armies that have been put into different nations, because the elites found out a long time ago, a modus operandi, that one way that they could control other nations was by installing foreign troops upon their land, and that foreign troops were more apt, more likely to persecute and to follow the orders, even if they're sinister and evil, of the higher-ups in the United Nations. And so that's why you see, and even here in this country and in this nation, we have supposedly 300,000 United Nations peacekeeping troops, predominantly of communist nations which hate, the controlled opposition of the capitalist system, and that the Chinese and the Russians, which are the biggest threat, and in a lot of these minor Muslim countries and nations, that these individuals and these groups have been brought into and are just waiting on a time when they will be utilized for their purpose, which is terrorism and to create, disarm the American public and to slaughter, rape, pillage, and plunder. And if you read the things that are spoken about in Jeremiah 50:51, you see that the caterpillars that are latent and that are sitting in the nation, in Mystery Babylon, just waiting for a time when they will be used to persecute the Christians and the masses that are then, and within that those few passages, which are decimated to in just very horrific ways, and that it says that they would not even be swayed by gold or money, that their purpose is to dash even newborn children, that they would have no compassion, no mercy, and that destruction is their aim. So, anyways, I just wanted to remind you that those things that are occurring as far as the four blood, the tetrad moons, and that this kind of thing had not happened until this century, which has happened 3 times. Very significant. In my opinion, that this particular time it's linked to what will be the unveiling of Antichrist and the false prophet, and also to the realization of the strong delusion and that whole setup. The fallen angels being, or the ancient aliens being the creators of humanity, and that even the very elect would be deceived if it were possible, and that Christ also said that unless the days be shortened, that there should be no flesh left. And so those are the kind of things that I foresee on the horizon, even though I pray that nothing of that kind of a nature have to take place, and that none of us have to suffer in any way, and that no child anywhere in the world would have to suffer, and no person would have to undergo to live through such agony and such torture. But already we have things going on in this world that are not being reported on, and Christians are being slaughtered even in this day and age, and that the reinstitution of cannibalism and the drinking of blood, especially that of innocent Christians, that these kind of things have been now ongoing for a very long time. And that if you look into the story of one general who goes by General Butt Naked, I know that sounds funny, but the serious aspect of the evil which he propagated during his reign, and that the individuals that followed him, he speaks about how before they would go into war, that they would cut up a child, a very innocent child, specifically one of a Christian child, and that they would cannibalize it, and that they thought that this would protect them, and that they would not even need clothes or any kind of protection, body armor, anything like that when going into battle. And to prove this, his followers, that they would go into the battle in the nude. And so these are some of the atrocities that have been taking place for years now. And so we don't even know the kind of things that are not being reported on. And there are certain news stories coming forth from places like Syria that are confirmation as to those things that I've been just speaking about as of late. All right. Jazz asks, from what country is he from? I believe that he was from one of these smaller African nations, Liberia, if I'm correct, or somewhere within the middle interior, one of these African nations. Congo, maybe he might have even been part of the slaughter between the Tutsi and I forget the clan, that that there was so much death and so much slaughter, that he could have been part of those wars, and can't remember. But you can certainly you can go to YouTube, because he is now a reformed, and he's a Christian preacher, and he goes into in very eloquent detail as to all of the sinister things that he was involved in during the time when he was fighting these wars, and that he had all of these child soldiers and different people following him, and that he was recognized by many of the other armies and rebel groups and as being very formidable in his strength and in his power. So anyways, today I want to cover one aspect of the gospel which a lot of people, when they only read from the King James Version and those particular texts, and they stick with what is revealed within the canon, that a lot of those that are anti-Christian or that are, atheists, or those that are against the Most High and Christ and the followers and the disciples, the apostles, and modern Christians and anybody even religious or remotely religious, that they will use this story as well as other stories like Joshua and the people Israel being taken into the land of Canaan after being freed from the bondage of Egypt, and the stories of them slaughtering every man, woman, and child, and many times even the cattle and all things living, that the opponents of the Most High and those that are anti-religious and anti-Christian, they will utilize these stories to try to verify and to prove that the God of the Old Testament was one of a homicidal and genocidal and schizophrenic nature, and that and so they try to bring these kind of things up. And for those that don't know the gospel very well, even pastors and preachers that don't understand about the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, and that these wars were against the hybrid children born from the interdiction and the interruption of the Nephilim with that of the daughters of Cain, and that these race of hybrid giants that were born unto that unholy matrimony, that they were cannibals, and that they were also blood drinkers, and that they were involved in idolatry where they worshiped their parents in certain abominable rituals, even sacrificing their own children, building up deathly and fires to cause the destruction of those that opposed them and that would not bow down to their gods, as happened to Abraham during the reign of Nimrod, and also to Daniel and his compatriots during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. And so these kind of things, and just really abominable ways of killing other people, heating up these bulls, and these idol gods, building of iron or brass, and building them big enough to where people could be put inside, and then having these idols slowly heated up over time so that the individuals within would be slowly roasted, and that their pain and their agony would be long enduring, and just and causing death in just such atrocious manner, that these are the kind of individuals the Most High had Israel go against when he told them to bring upon the death of the inhabitants of that land. And so these things aren't spoken about and not well understood, or not even taught by most of the mainstream churches. And so I'd say at least 90% of the pastors and the preachers and the ministers do not understand gospel in this way, and so they are not able to counter the arguments of these atheists and these people that are anti-religious, and that a lot of them will totally just even disqualify themselves from the Old Testament and say that, well, I only follow the New Testament, I only read the New Testament, and I only serve Christ. And, that not only are they deniers of the Most High, but Christ was the fulfillment of the Old Testament. He and his Father are one, and he speaks about the same war that Joshua inflicted upon the sons of Canaan, the sons of Anak, that were then in that land, with the destruction, the separation of the wheat and the tares, the sheep and the goat. And that when he comes again to complete the slaughter of that bloodline and that seed line. And he will eradicate them as if they had never been. It would have been better for them to never even have been born. And so these are some of the deeper aspects of the gospel that not a lot of people speak about in this day and age, especially within the mainstream churches, and that's why I think that so many of us have been called out. And so I'm going to bring detail to this story to help you understand it better, so that you can, when somebody questions the Most High God as to why it was that he asked Abraham to sacrifice, to make a burnt offering of his only son. Well, we know that Ishmael was also one of his children, but the son that was favored, Isaac, that would be the one that would inherit the land that was promised to Abraham. And that the Ishmaelites and even the sons of Esau, that they are counted with the seed of the serpent. That even though they were born of the bloodline of the Sethites and the bloodline through Abraham, they are excluded from the promises that go out to the seed of the woman. And they are large part are responsible for such decision because of their election and because of the actions and their behaviors. That's why it says in the word, Jacob have I favored, but Esau have I hated. And that this all goes back to, again, to our pre-election and what kind of life that we were predestinated to live. And that Esau, the Most High knew he would sell his birthright, and that he was serving with the rebels and with those that were warring against the Most High God, even during his first incarnation, his spiritual embodiment. And so that's why we see him now and his children being excluded from the blessings of the seed of the woman. Not saying that some of them cannot be counted among, those blessings and among these Sethite, because certainly there have been, even like with Rahab, there have been others that, even though they were born into the line of Cain, that they have redeemed themselves, and they have sided and aligned with that of the seed of the woman and the blessings that are there that will be poured out on the elect. And so, covering this story about the sacrifice of Abraham and Isaac, I'm going to read it, parallel accounts from 3 different sources. And we should have plenty of time to do this, but I'm going to read it from Genesis chapter 22, about the story about Abraham and Isaac. Then I'm going to read it from the Targums, which also gives some verification and also some further detail as to what was going on, and it gives you a little bit more background for the foundation of the story. And then we're going to elaborate completely with the great detail that is found within the book of Jasher, because it tells this story and gives a description of it in a way that is not found in most other texts. And that, having read and studied from the book of Jasher, this particular accounting, it will absolutely verify and help you to understand why it was that Abraham and Isaac, that both of them were tested in such manner. But before we do so, I want to share with you a letter that came in that was actually sent to John the Baptist. And also, just so you know, I will be joining him for roundtable discussion tomorrow night. The name of the show has not been, it hasn't been set, and that John has not yet sent me the link. But that when I do have that, and I will make it available on the Facebook page. But it will be probably around 8:30 tomorrow evening, and that we're going to be covering some basic concepts of, those things that he and I and Jonathan Kleck and now many others have been talking about as far as the strong delusion and those concepts which are not very well accepted and certainly not taught by the mainstream churches. And those things include, things like predestination, election, and the seed of the woman, the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, and that what occurred with the eating of the fruit, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that was actually symbolic and metaphorically veiling that Eve was beguiled by the serpent, and that the results of that beguilement was that she gave birth to Cain, who was the first hybrid, and that he was the patriarch, the head of his entire lineage and bloodline. And that we are not all the same, but that there are two different people here upon this planet. And that there is a war, there has been a battle being fought between these two bloodlines and lineages going all the way back to the inception of what was the birth of Eve as the mother of all living, of Cain and Abel, who were half-brothers, and that Cain slaughtered his half-brother Abel, and that he was replaced by Seth, who became the patriarch for the seed of the woman and of the Sethites, the Adamites, through his particular seed. And that even Christ was born of the Sethite line. That if you look at Luke chapter 3, I believe it's verse 23 through 30-something, that you will find that Cain is left out of his lineage, and that Cain is not genealogized even into what are the sons of Adam. All right, so really quick, this particular letter, which I think is inspiring, and it will be something that I think a lot of you can relate to, especially those that are new to the show and that are discovering these kind of things for the first time. It says this, and the lady's name was Carol, so just keep that in mind. I'm so sorry to bother you again, but I was hoping you could get this to Jonathan Kleck as I haven't found his email. Through John Baptist, I found Zen and have read much of his stuff, and I have moved on to Jonathan Kleck, culminating with listening to his last two broadcasts. Little bit of background about the lady. She says, I am 61 years of age, and by the mercy of God, I have just begun to wake up this year. Embarrassing to say up until now, but I did not realize the true story of the Garden of Eden and the apple, nor did I know the truth of 9/11, alien demons, etc. Having attended various denominational churches all my life, and as a professor with a PhD from a Christian university, I am a shining example of the demonization of our religious and educational system. I am still in somewhat of a state of shock as my eyes are now opening to the truth. First, I wanted to tell Jonathan that he is not alone. Protestant families, as well as Catholic families, disown their own, as this has happened to me due to their extreme legalism, and it was before I began to really wake up. The story of the ugly duckling comes to mind, and the story of the zygote fairy who got lost. As you said, we find new true spiritual families, and I thank God multiple times a day for the electric ecclesia He has mercifully led me to find. A couple other paragraphs. The point of this email is because I just listened to Jonathan Kleck's April 2nd broadcast and followed the pictures. It immediately rang as true. I am still reverberating and asking God to keep all evil away from me today as I process these things. When I read Zen's Father of Cain, I dropped to my face on the floor, recognizing the truth of the sexual perversion in our daily culture, directly relating to satanic influence and the spiritual blindness of the church. I am still repenting of my own sins, and my heart details the connection to the papal regalia. You brought into clear, undeniable focus the truth of this age, the Father of all lies, and His intentions from the beginning and what is on our imminent doorstep. May God be with you and give you extra protection as you bring the agonizing truth forward. As one of your callers said, we do not need to know our adversary, even though to face the truth of evil is so difficult for me. I am in the counseling special education field, and now I feel I have wasted my entire life following the secular model of helping others. I can't thank you enough. May God send you extra mercies for whatever you need. Last year I began to ask God if I could be attached to the trees that bring healing in the next age, and maybe in His mercy He will hear my prayer. May God pour His healing on you right now as you endure such evil for our edification. A thought is forming in my mind that I would like to bring the truth of Eve's apple and where the sexual perversion is coming from and where we are heading to the college students that I am associated with, but I have no idea how that might play out. I do know that I pray God's protecting angels over our campus to fight off the evil. We are located between a Mormon temple and a Catholic boys' school. Words cannot express my gratitude and thanks to both John and Zen and all who work with you. To Him who is able to protect us and keep us, be all glory forever and ever. And so I thought it was interesting that, she was a PhD professor from having got her degree within a Christian college, and that she probably went through the seminary process and that, they did not teach her any of these things that myself and Jonathan and also John the Baptist have been talking about now for many years. That, I've been on the radio since 2008, and that we've covered quite a number of topics, and many of the extra-biblical, extra-canonical texts, the pseudepigrapha, the apocryphal, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi codices, all these different things which are bringing extra understanding and detailing those things that we little understand and that we do not have discernment and revelation upon, simply because we have not looked into what is the fullness of the gospel, in my opinion. And that for many people that have studied only the canon for their entirety of their lives, 20, 30, up to 60 years, so many of these individuals still do not understand and cannot grasp what is being spoken about, and certainly have overlooked or ignored the esoteric aspects of, as far as the fallen angels and the enmity between the different bloodlines, the lineages, predestination and pre-election and these kind of things, that unless you have discernment of these particular concepts, so much of what is veiled within the Word, in my opinion, just does not make any kind of sense at all. And that this is another one of those things, as far as the sacrifice of Isaac by Abraham. It's another one of those things that you don't understand in full until you hear the other aspects of those things that are connected to and that parallel this particular accounting. And so, that being said, we're going to go into the story of the sacrifice of Isaac. And beginning with Genesis 22, I'm going to cover these really fast and then kind of expound upon and spend a little bit more time with commentary on the Jasher accounting of this story. So, Genesis chapter 22, and it says, "And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place afar off, and Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. And so they went both of them together, and they came to the place which God had told him of. And Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing that thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, In the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and multiplying I will multiply thee, thy seed as the stars of heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. All right, the Targum accounting is very short as well, but it does provide some extra detail. And one of these accountings also speaks about how this particular altar that Abraham is to sacrifice Isaac upon is the same altar that Adam had built up, and that Noah also had built up and worshiped upon, and that it was destroyed somewhat from the global deluge that took place during the time of Noah. And so this altar was repaired by Abraham to be utilized as a burnt offering when he was to sacrifice Isaac. And so you'll hear that in one of the accountings when I talk about that. But it's interesting to me how the Most High God keeps bringing them back to the same place. It says this. This is chapter 22 within the Targums. And it was after these things that Isaac and Ishmael contended. And Ishmael said, It is right that I should inherit what is thy father's, because I am his firstborn son. And Isaac said, It is right that I should inherit what is the father's, because I am the son of Sarah his wife, and thou art the son of Hagar, the handmaid of my mother. Ishmael answered and said, I am more righteous than thou, because I was circumcised at 13 years. And if I had been my will to hinder, they should not have delivered me to be circumcised. But thou wast circumcised a child 8 days. And if thou hadst had knowledge, perhaps they could not have delivered thee to be circumcised. Isaac responded and said, Behold, now, today, I am 36 years old, and if the Holy One, blessed be He, were to require all my members, I would not delay. These words were heard before the Lord of the world, and the word of the Lord at once tried Abraham, and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Behold me. And it was after these things that the Lord tried Abraham with the 10th trial, and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Behold me. And he said, Take now thy son, thy only offering, upon one of the mountains that I will tell thee of worship, and offer him there a whole burnt offering upon one of the mountains that I will tell thee at Mount Moriah. And Abraham rose up in the morning and saddled his ass, and took 2 young men with him, Eleazar and Ishmael and Isaac his son, and cut the small wood and the figs and the palm which are provided for the whole burnt offering. and arose and went to the land of which the Lord had told him. All right, I'm going to stop here for just a second and want to emphasize something. Now, this is found both in the Targum account as well as that of the Jasher account. And that's the contending of both Isaac and Ishmael. And that Ishmael says that he deserves the inheritance and that he's more righteous than Isaac because he had allowed himself to be circumcised when he was 13 years old. And not, because of his being a child and not having a choice and not knowing. And so when Isaac said that I would, if the Lord of the world desired all of my members and all of me as sacrifice, I would not hold it from him. And so this became the reason for what would be and you'll notice also that it says the angel of the Lord or the word of the Lord, which in my, as I've done shows speaking about the word or the angel of the Lord, that this is Christ, that this is Yahushua that is going to Abraham and that overheard the exclamation of Isaac and that would bring this to Abraham as a trial. And so it wasn't, just that Abraham wasn't righteous enough or that he just wanted to, that the word or the angel of the Lord just wanted to test Abraham in such a way. This was more about Isaac and the contention that came about from Ishmael and Isaac in their discourse. All right, so continuing, and then when we get to the Jasher accounting, it's beautifully flavored in that it's rich in detail. Let me check the chat room real quick. And if you have any question, of course, just bring it to the chat room and just give me a chance to get to it. But I appreciate it. I'm about to do that, Jose. Jose asked me, Zen, why don't you read about the tricks of Satan? And I will get to that when I cover the Jasher accounting. Because, as I said, it gives a lot more detail as to what occurred with this particular event. All right, I'm going to finish up with the Targum accounting, and then we'll go into Jasher. On the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and beheld a cloud of glory fuming on the mount, and it was discerned by him afar off. And Abraham said to his young man, wait you here with the ass, and I and the young man will proceed yonder to prove if that which was promised shall be established. So shall be thy sons, and we will worship the Lord of the world and return to you. And Abraham took the wood of the offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and his hands he took to the fire and the knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake to Abraham his father, and said, my father. And I said, I am. And he said, behold, the fire and the wood, where is the lamb for thy offering? And Abraham said, the Lord will choose for himself a lamb for the offering. And they went both of them in heart entirely as one. And Abraham said, the word of the Lord will prepare for me a lamb, and if not, then thou art the offering, my son. And they went both of them together with a contrite heart. There again, the word of the Lord. All right. And they came to the place of which the Lord had told him, and Abraham builded there the altar which Adam had built, which had been destroyed by the waters of the deluge, which Noah has again builded. and which had been destroyed in the age of divisions. And he set the wood in order upon it, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And Isaac answered and said to his father, Bind me properly aright, lest I tremble from the affliction of my soul, and be cast into the pit of destruction, and there be found profaneness in thy offering. Now the eyes of Abraham looked on the eyes of Isaac, but the eyes of Isaac looked toward the angels on high, and Isaac beheld them, but Abraham saw them not. And the angels answered on high, Come, behold now these solitary ones who are in the world, kill the one the other. He who slayeth delays not. He who is to be slain reacheth forth his neck. And so Isaac is trying to make sure that he, goes along with what his father is trying to do. All right. There's also a Jerusalem accounting. I'm not going to read that because it repeats. The Targums have both the Palestinian and the Jerusalem accounting, and if they differ in any way, there will be extra detail given. But I'm going to just skip that part because I don't want to repeat it. And the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said to him, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Behold me. And he said, Stretch not out thy hand upon the young man, neither do him any evil. For now it is manifest before me that thou fearest the Lord, neither hast thou withheld thy son, the only begotten, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, a certain ram which had been created between the evenings of the foundation of the world, was held in the entanglement of a tree by his horns. And Abraham went and took him and offered him an offering instead of his son. And Abraham gave thanks and prayed there in that place and said, I pray through the mercies that are before thee, O Lord, before whom it is manifest that it was not in the depth of my heart to turn away from doing thy decree with joy, that when the children of Isaac my son shall offer in the hour of affliction, this may be a memorial for them, and thou mayest hear them and deliver them, and that all generations to come may say, In this mountain Abraham bound Isaac his son, and there the Shekinah of the Lord was revealed unto him. All right. Last chapter. And it was after these things that Abraham had bound Isaac that Satan came and told unto Sarah that Abraham had killed Isaac. And Sarah arose and cried out and was strangled and died from agony. But Abraham had come and was resting in the way, and it was told Abraham, saying, Behold, Milcah also has borne, she hath enlargement, through the righteousness of her sister, for bring forth sons unto Nahor thy brother. And so you see how Satan caused the death of Sarah by telling her that Isaac had been murdered by her father. And this story from the story of Jasher, again, will give extra detail and will show the many times that Satan was trying to deceive Abraham and to keep him from following through with the decree of the angel of the Lord, which again, in my opinion, is Christ, Yahushua, Jesus Christ, the Word. Chapter 22 from the book of Jasher. And Isaac, the son of Abraham, was growing up in those days, and Abraham, his father, taught him the way of the Lord to know the Lord, and the Lord was with him. And when Isaac was 37 years old, Ishmael, his brother, was going about with him in the tent. And Ishmael boasted of himself to Isaac, saying, I was 13 years old when the Lord spoke to my father to circumcise us. And I did according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke to my father. And I gave my soul unto the Lord, and I did not transgress his word which he commanded my father. And Isaac answered Ishmael, saying, Why dost thou boast to me about this, about a little bit of thy flesh, which thou didst take from thy body, concerning which the Lord commanded thee? And as the Lord liveth, the God of my father Abraham, if the Lord should say unto my father, Take now thy son Isaac, and bring up an offering for me, I would not refrain, but I would joyfully accede to it. So here again you see the boast of Isaac. That it was this boast that results in the angel of the Lord, or the word of the Lord, Christ, going to Abraham and asking him to perform this degree, which is a trial for both he and his son. All right. And it's not just out of the blue that, the angel of the Lord, or the word of the Lord, just went to Abraham and out of some, genocidal thought said, why don't we have Abraham sacrifice his child today? All right, continuing. And the Lord heard of the word that Isaac spoke to Ishmael, and it seemed good in the sight of the Lord, and he thought to try Abraham in this matter. And the day arrived when the sons of God came and placed themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with the sons of God before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. Sort of like Job. All right, continuing. And the Lord said to Satan, What is thy word to me concerning all the children of the earth? And Satan answered the Lord and said, I have seen all the children of the earth, and serve thee, and remember thee, when they require anything from thee. And when thou givest them the thing which they require from thee, they sit at their ease and forsake thee, and they remember thee no more. Hast thou seen Abraham the son of Terah, who at first had no children, and he served thee and erected altars to thee wherever he came, and he brought up offering upon them, and he proclaimed thy name continually to all the children of the earth. And now that his son Isaac is born to him, he has forsaken thee. He has made a great feast for all the inhabitants of the land, and the Lord he has forgotten. For amidst all that he has done, he brought thee no offering, neither burnt offering, nor peace offering, neither ox, lamb, or goat, of all that he killed on the day that his son was weaned. Even from the time of his son's birth till now, being 37 years, he built no altar before thee, nor brought any offering to thee, for he saw that thou didst give what he requested before thee, and he therefore forsook thee. And the Lord said to Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Abraham? For there is none like him upon earth, perfect and upright man, before me, one that feareth God and avoideth evil. As I live, were I to say unto him, Bring up Isaac thy son before me, he would not withhold him from me. Much more if I told him to bring up a burnt offering before me from the flock of herds. And Satan answered the Lord and said, Speak then now unto Abraham as thou hast said, and thou wilt see whether he will not this day transgress and cast aside thy words. And at that time the word of the Lord came to Abraham, and he said unto Abraham, and he said, Here I am. And he said to him, Take now thy son, thine only son, whom thou lovest, even Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which shall be shown to thee. For there wilt thou see a cloud and the glory of the Lord. And Abraham said within himself, How shall I separate my son Isaac from Sarah his mother, in order to bring him up for a burnt offering before the Lord? And Abraham came unto the tent, and he sat before Sarah his wife, and he spoke his words to her. My son Isaac is grown up, and he has for some time studied the service of his God. Now we will go and bring him to Shem and Eber his son, and there he will learn the ways of the Lord, for they will teach him to know the Lord as well as to know that which he prayeth continually before the Lord. He will answer him, therefore he will know the way of serving the Lord his God. And Sarah said, Thou hast spoken well. Go, my Lord, and do unto him as thou hast said. But remove him not a great distance from me, neither let him remain there too long, for my soul is bound within his soul. And Abraham said unto Sarah, My daughter, let us pray to the Lord our God, that he may do good with us. And Sarah took her son Isaac, and he abode all that night with her, and she kissed and embraced him, and gave him instructions until morning. And she said to him, O my son, how can my soul separate itself from thee? And she still kissed him and embraced him, and she gave Abraham instructions concerning him. And Sarah said to Abraham, O my Lord, I pray thee, take heed of thy son, and place thine eyes over him, for I have no other son nor daughter but him. O forsake him not, give him bread, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. Do not let him go on foot, neither let him sit in the sun. Neither let him go by himself in the road, neither force him whatever he may desire, but do unto him as he may say to thee. And Sarah wept bitterly the whole night on account of Isaac. She gave him instructions until morning. And the morning Sarah selected a very fine and beautiful garment from those garments which she had in the house that Abimelech had given to her. And she took Isaac her son therewith, and she put a turban upon his head. She enclosed a precious stone in the top of the turban, and she gave the vision for the road. And they went forth, and Isaac went with his father Abraham. And some of the servants accompanied him. To go forth and to see them off the road. And Sarah went out with them, and she accompanied them on the road to see them off. And they said to her, Return to the tent. And when Sarah heard the words of her son Isaac, she wept bitterly. Abraham, her husband, wept with her, and their son wept with them a great weeping, and those who went with them also wept greatly. All right. Here's the journey forth. And Sarah caught hold of her son Isaac, and she held him in her arms, and she embraced him, and continued to weep with him. And Sarah said, Who knoweth if after this day I shall ever see thee again? And they still wept together, Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac, and all those who that came down the road wept with them. And Sarah afterward turned away from her son, weeping bitterly. All her men servants and maid servants returned with her to the tent. And Abraham went with Isaac his son to bring up as an offering before the Lord as he had commanded him. And Abraham took of his young men with him Ishmael the son of Hagar and Eleazar his servant. And they went together with them, and whilst they were walking on the road, the young men spoke these words to themselves. And Ishmael said to Eleazar, now my father Abraham is going with Isaac to bring him up for a burnt offering to the Lord as he commanded him. Now when he returns, he will give unto me all that he possesses, to inherit after him, for I am his firstborn. And Eleazar answered Ishmael and said, surely Abraham did cast thee away with thy mother, and swore that thou shouldst not inherit anything of all that he possesses. And to him will he give all that he has with all his treasures, but unto me his servant, who has been faithful in his house, who has served him night and day, and done all that he desired me. To me will he bequeath all at his death, all that he possessed. And whilst Abraham was proceeding with his son Isaac along the road, Satan came and appeared to Abraham in the figure of a very aged man, humble and contrite spirit, and he approached Abraham and said to him, art thou silly or brutish that thou goest to do this thing this day to thine only son? For God gave thee a son in thy days and in thy old age, and wilt thou go and slaughter him this day, because he committeth no violence, and wilt thou cause the soul of thine only son to perish from the earth? You're going to see many trials of Satan in different forms that he comes in, which again verifies that he's the shapeshifter. And one of the interesting aspects of one of the forms he takes on is that of a brook, which is interesting, that Satan would take on the form of a river. All right. Dost thou not understand that this thing cannot be from the Lord? For the Lord cannot do unto man such evil upon earth, to say to him, go slaughter thy child. Abraham heard this and knew that it was the word of Satan to endeavor to draw him aside from the ways of the Lord. But Abraham would not hear the voice of Satan. And Abraham rebuked him so that he went away. And Satan returned and came to Isaac, and he peered into Isaac in the figure of a young man, comely and well favored. And he approached Isaac and said unto him, dost thou not know and understand that thy old silly father bringeth thee to the slaughter this day for naught? Now therefore, my son, do not listen nor to him, for he is a silly old man, and let not thy precious soul and beautiful figure be lost from the earth. And Isaac heard this, said unto Abraham, hast thou heard, my father, that which this man hath spoken? Even thus has he spoken? And Abraham answered his son Isaac and said to him, take heed of him, and do not listen to his words, nor to him. For he is Satan, endeavoring to draw us aside this day from the command of God. And Abraham still rebuked Satan, and Satan went from them, and seeing he could not prevail over them, he hid himself from them. And he went and passed before them in the road, and he transformed himself to a large brook of water road. And Abraham and his two young men reached that place, and they saw a brook large and powerful as the mighty waters. And they entered the brook and passed through it, and the waters at first reached their legs. And they went deeper in the brook, and the water reached up to their necks, and they were all terrified on account of the water. And whilst they were going over the brook, Abraham recognized the place, and he knew that there was no water there before. And Abraham said to his son Isaac, I know this place in which there was no brook nor water. Now therefore it is this Satan who does all this to us, to draw us aside this day from the commands of God. And Abraham rebuked him and said unto him, the Lord rebuke thee, O Satan, begone from us, for we go by the command of God." And Satan was terrified at the voice of Abraham, and he went away from them, and the place again became dry land, as it was at first. And Abraham went with Isaac toward that place that God had told him. And on the third day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place at a distance, which God had told him of. And a pillar of fire appeared to him that reached from the earth to heaven, and a cloud of glory upon the mountain. And the glory of the Lord was seen in the cloud. And Abraham said to Isaac, "My son, dost thou see that mountain which we perceive at a distance, that which I see upon it?" And Isaac answered and said unto his father, "I see, and lo, a pillar of fire and a cloud, and the glory of the Lord is seen upon the cloud." And Abraham knew that his son Isaac was accepted before the Lord for a burnt offering. And Abraham said unto Eleazar and unto Ishmael his son, "Do you also see that which we see upon the mountain which is at a distance?" And they answered and said, "We see nothing more than like the other mountains of the earth." And Abraham knew that they were not accepted before the Lord to go with them. And Abraham said to them, "Abide ye here with the ass, whilst I and Isaac my son will go to yonder mount, and worship there before the Lord, and then return to you." And Eleazar and Ishmael remained in that place as Abraham had commanded. And Abraham took wood for a burnt offering and placed it upon his son Isaac, and he took fire and the knife, and they both went to that place. And when they were going along, Isaac said to his father, "Behold, I see here the fire and the wood, and where then is the lamb that is to be the burnt offering before the Lord?" And Abraham answered his son Isaac, saying, "The Lord has made choice of thee, my son, to be a perfect burnt offering instead of the lamb." And Isaac said unto his father, "I will do all that the Lord spoke to thee with joy and cheerfulness of heart." And Abraham again said unto Isaac his son, "Is there in thy heart any thought or counsel concerning this, which is not proper? Tell me, my son, I pray thee, O my son, conceal it not from me." And Isaac answered his father Abraham, and said unto him, "O my father, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, there is nothing in my heart to cause me to deviate, either to the right or to the left, from the word that he has spoken to thee. Neither limb nor muscle has moved or stirred at this, nor is there in my heart any thought or evil counsel concerning this. But I am of joyful and cheerful heart in this matter, and I say, Blessed is the Lord, who has this day chosen me to be a burnt offering before him." And Abraham greatly rejoiced at the words of Isaac, and they went on and came together to that place that the Lord had spoken of. And Abraham approached to build the altar in that place, and Abraham was weeping. And Isaac took stones and mortar until they had finished building the altar. And Abraham took the wood and placed it in order upon the altar which he had built. And we're almost done. And he took his son Isaac and bound him in order to place him upon the wood which was upon the altar, to slay him for a burnt offering before the Lord. And Isaac said to his father, Bind me securely, and then place me upon the altar, lest I should turn and move, and break loose from the force of the knife upon my flesh, and thereof profane the burnt offering. And Abraham did so. And Isaac still said to his father, O my father, when thou shalt have slain me, and burnt me for an offering, take with thee that which shall remain of my ashes, to bring to Sarah my mother, and say to her, This is the sweet-smelling savor of Isaac. But do not tell her this if she would sit near a well or upon any high place, lest she should cast her soul after me and die. And Abraham heard the words of Isaac, and he lifted up his voice and wept when Isaac spake these words. And Abraham's tears gushed down upon Isaac his son, and Isaac wept bitterly, and he said to his father, Hasten thou, O my father, and do with me the will of the Lord our God, as he has commanded thee. And the hearts of Abraham and Isaac rejoiced at these things which the Lord had commanded them, but the eyes wept bitterly, whilst the heart rejoiced. And Abraham bound his son Isaac and placed him on the altar upon the wood, and Isaac stretched forth his neck upon the altar before his father. And Abraham stretched forth his hand to take the knife, to slay his son as a burnt offering before the Lord. And at that time the angels of mercy came before the Lord and spake to him concerning Isaac, saying, O Lord, thou art merciful and compassionate, King over all that hast created in heaven and in earth, and thou supportest them all. Give therefore ransom and redemption instead of thy servant Isaac, and pity and have compassion upon Abraham and Isaac his son, who are this day performing thy commands. Hast thou seen, O Lord, how Isaac the son of Abraham, thy servant, is bound down to slaughter like an animal? Now therefore let thy pity be roused for them, O Lord. And at that time the Lord appeared unto Abraham and called to him from heaven and said unto him, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest God in performing this act, and in not withholding thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted his eyes and saw, and behold, a ram was caught in the thicket by his horns. That was the ram which the Lord God had created in the earth in the day that he made the earth and heaven. For the Lord hath prepared this ram from that day to be a burnt offering instead of Isaac. And this ram was advancing to Abraham when Satan caught hold of him and entangled his horns in the thicket, that he might not advance to Abraham, in order that Abraham might slay his son. And Abraham, seeing the ram advancing to him and Satan withholding him, fetched him and brought him before the altar. And he loosed his son Isaac from his binding, and he put the ram in his stead. And Abraham killed the ram upon the altar and brought it up as an offering in the place of his son Isaac. And Abraham sprinkled some of the blood of the ram upon the altar, and exclaimed and said, This is in the place of my son, and may this be considered this day as the blood of my son before the Lord. In all that Abraham did on this occasion by the altar, he would exclaim and say, This is in the room of my son, and may it this day be considered before the Lord in the place of my son. And Abraham finished the whole of the service by the altar, and the service was accepted before the Lord, and was accounted as it had been Isaac, and the Lord blessed Abraham and his seed on that day. We're quickly running out of time, but I'm going to just read just a little bit more. This is about how Satan goes to Sarah and tries to trick her and causes her death. And Satan went to Sarah, and he appeared to her in the figure of an old man, very humble and meek. And Abraham was yet engaged in the burnt offering before the Lord. And he said unto her, Dost thou not know all the work that Abraham has made with thine only son this day? For he took Isaac and built an altar and killed him and brought him up as a sacrifice upon the altar. And Isaac cried and wept before his father, but he looked not at him, neither did he have compassion over him. And Satan repeated these words and went away from her, and Sarah heard all the words of Satan. And she imagined him to be an old man from amongst the sons of men, who had been with her son, and had come and told her these things. And Sarah lifted up her voice and wept and cried out bitterly on account of her son, and she threw herself upon the ground, and she cast dust upon her head, and she said, O my son Isaac, my son, oh, that I had this day died instead of thee. And she continued to weep and said, It grieves me for thee, O my son Isaac. Oh, that I had died this day in thy stead. I'm just going to read a couple more. I might be able to finish it, actually. And she still continued to weep and said, It grieves me for thee after that I have reared thee and have brought thee up, and now my joy is turned into mourning over thee. I that I had a longing for thee, and cried and prayed to God till I bare thee at 90 years old, and now hast thou served this day for the knife and the fire to be made an offering. But I console myself with thee, my son, in its being the word of the Lord. For thou didst perform the command of thy God. For who can transgress the word of our God, in whose hands is the soul of every living creature? Thou art just, O Lord God, for all thy works are good and righteous, for I also am rejoiced with thy word, which thou didst command, and whilst mine eye weepeth bitterly, my heart rejoiceth. And Sarah laid her head upon the bosom of one of her handmaids, and she became as still as a stone. She afterward rose up and went about making inquiries till she came to Hebron. And she inquired of all those whom she met walking to the road, and no one could tell her what had happened to her son. And she came with her maidservants and men servants to Kiriath Arba, which is Hebron. She asked concerning her son, and she remained there while she sent some of her servants to seek where Abraham had gone with Isaac. They went to seek him in the house of Shem and Eber, and they could not find him, and they sought throughout the land, and he was not there. And behold, Satan came to Sarah in the shape of an old man, and he came and stood before her, and he said unto her, I spoke falsely unto thee, for Abraham did not kill his son, and he is not dead. And when she heard the word, her joy was so exceedingly violent on account of her son that her soul went out through joy. She died and was gathered to her people. And when Abraham had finished his service, he returned with his son Isaac to his young man, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba, and they came home. And Abraham sought for Sarah and could not find her. He made inquiries concerning her, and they said unto him, She went as far as Hebron to seek you both where you had gone. For this was she informed. Last two passages. And Abraham and Isaac went to her to Hebron, and when they found that she was dead, they lifted up their voices and wept bitterly over her. And Isaac fell upon his mother's face and wept over her. And he said, O my mother, how hast thou left me, and where hast thou gone? Oh, how hast thou left me? And Abraham and Isaac wept greatly, and all their servants wept with them on account of Sarah, and they mourned over her a great and heavy mourning. And so you see how the book of Jasher and even the Targums, how they provide so much more information as to the things that are spoken of and written about in the canon, in the Old and New Testament. And so that's why I implore those of you that are seekers of truth to do your own research, to do your own study, and to read, even though, a lot of this is repetitive and that things are being told over and over again. It's my opinion that the Father, the Most High, does so in order that, because the sons of Cain have been trying to hide this information from you and have been trying to dissipate the gospel in every way, in everywhere that they can, in order to keep truth from you. And that's why we must study to show ourselves approved. And that when we do so, we learn more and more about the compassion, the love of the Most High for all of us. With that, God bless all. Join me this Wednesday on Revolution Radio. Till then, may the Most High, the Father and the Son, watch over and keep you safe and protect you from all things. In Yahushua, Yahuwah's name I pray. Amen all. Good night.